Ever get that feeling like the online world is like uh tailored just for you?
Yeah.
Like a bespoke reality, built on your biases and interests?
Hmm.
It's a pretty wild idea. Explored in Invisible Rulers, a book by Renee Desta.
Right. And I think what's so interesting about Desta's perspective is that she actually came from Wall Street trading and then transitioned into researching misinformation.
Wow.
So she has this really unique lens to look at this information ecosystem in a way that I think few other people do.
Yeah, so it's not just about the tech, but like the human psychology behind it all,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And
Yeah.
actually, Dessa's journey into this world started with a very personal experience that I think a lot of parents can relate to, which is this concern about the spread of vaccine misinformation.
Hmm.
So back in 2015, when the anti-vaccine movement really started gaining traction online, she saw firsthand how these online campaigns could actually have real-world consequences.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And, Duresta doesn't just give us a general overview of the problem. She really dives into the mechanics of how misinformation spreads.
Right.
And one of her most insightful arguments, I think, is that it's not just about a few bad actors or, powerful tech companies. She really emphasizes that misinformation thrives on three pillars: influencers, algorithms, and surprisingly, crowds.
Crowds meaning us.
Us.
It's very easy to think that we're just these passive consumers of information, but DeResta really makes the argument that we play a much more active role than we realize.
Right.
We're sharing things, we're liking, we're commenting on content, often without really critically evaluating, the validity of that information.
Yeah.
So in doing so, we become these unwitting participants in the spread of misinformation.
So we almost become part of the machine.
Precisely. And that really ties into, I think, another one of the DeResta's key points, which is the significant role of emotions in online engagement.
Mm.
Right. So sensationalized content, even if it's false, really triggers strong emotional responses, and that makes it much more likely to be shared and spread.
Right.
So, while algorithms might be designed to promote engagement, they can actually unintentionally amplify misinformation simply because it elicits those visceral reactions that we have.
Oh, that's kind of scary that our own emotions are being used against us.
It is.
Wow.
And Duresta goes beyond, just describing the problem.
Yeah.
She really analyzes specific platforms and their algorithms and gives us concrete examples of how, their design choices might actually contribute to this spread of misinformation.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So, for instance, she criticizes the way that some platforms prioritize engagement metrics over content quality.
Right.
So, you're essentially rewarding sensationalism regardless of, its accuracy.
So it's not even just about these shadowy figures who are intentionally spreading lies. It's really like the structure of these platforms that's incentivizing it, even if it's unintentional a lot of the time.
Exactly. It's baked into the system. But, it's not all about technology either.
Right.
Duresta also goes deep into sort of the motivations of the influencers themselves.
Right.
And it's not always about ideology,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some are driven by, desire for attention, others by financial gain.
Mm-hmm.
And she profiles some, figures like Amazing Polly, who gained prominence within QAnon.
Right.
Or Jack Posobiec, who is known for pushing pro-Trump narratives. She even looks at the trajectory of Matt Taibbi, a journalist who seemingly went down a rabbit hole of misinformation himself.
Wow. So it's like this really complex interplay of personalities, motivations, and algorithms all coming together to create these tailored realities. It almost sounds like a conspiracy theory itself.
Yeah, and I think the irony of that is not lost on Duresta. She actually dedicates a section of her book to this phenomenon of misinformation panic.
Right.
This idea that, concerns about misinformation are overblown or even a form of social control.
Didn't some articles come out recently suggesting that the misinformation panic was over? I feel like I remember that, and there was a lot of debate around that.
There were a few, and Duresta actually directly addresses those arguments in her book.
Okay.
She uses her research and personal experience
Yeah.
to really refute this notion that, the threat has passed.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, she argues that the problem is far more nuanced and really kind of entrenched than, those articles suggest.
Right. And it's interesting because her own experiences kind of illustrate how real this danger is, right?
Yes.
She became a target herself just by trying to understand and expose this phenomenon. So this isn't just some, academic exercise. This is a battle with real stakes.
Absolutely. Duresta, along with other researchers like Kate Starbird, has faced intense scrutiny and even coordinated attacks.
Wow.
These attacks range from congressional hearings and subpoenas to online harassment and even lawsuits.
Oh, wow.
It's a really chilling example of how those who are, seeking to expose misinformation often become the targets of the very forces they're trying to study.
It's like shining a light on a shadowy corner and then getting attacked by what lurks there.
Exactly. A very apt analogy.
Mm.
And the tactics used against these researchers are often quite sophisticated.
Right.
They're accused of censorship, of having a political agenda, even of being part of a grand conspiracy themselves.
Wait, they accuse the researchers of misinformation.
Yeah.
That's ironic.
The irony is palpable,
Yeah.
but it's a classic tactic to discredit the messengers and deflect attention from the message itself. And sadly, this approach has actually had a chilling effect. Stanford University, for example, actually shut down its Internet Observatory.
Oh, wow.
And many researchers have gone silent, fearing for their careers and reputations.
So if these researchers are being silenced, then who benefits?
Right.
And what does that mean for our ability to combat this?
Yeah, it raises some important questions for sure. If we can't even study and understand misinformation, how can we hope to counter it?
Yeah, it's a chilling thought. And it really underscores, I think, DeResta's core argument, which is that we're all participants in this information ecosystem, whether we realize it or not.
Right. We're not just passively consuming it, we're actively contributing to it,
Yeah,
which is both empowering and a little bit terrifying.
precisely. It
Yeah.
means we have a responsibility to be more discerning about what we consume and share online.
Yeah.
Every click, every retweet, it all contributes to the spread of information, whether it's accurate or not.
Right. And this brings us back to that concept of bespoke realities.
Right. Right.
How do we break out of these echo chambers? How do we even recognize that we're in one in the first place?
Yeah, that's the tough question. And, DeResta doesn't claim to have all the answers.
Of course.
But she stresses the importance of critical thinking, questioning sources, seeking out diverse perspectives, being aware of our own biases, essentially developing this healthy skepticism of everything we see online, which is tough because so much of it is designed to play on our emotions.
Right. And that's where I think understanding the tactics of these influencers and the power of algorithms becomes really crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Once you recognize those patterns,
Yeah.
you can start to see through the manipulation a little bit.
So it's about becoming more media literate,
Yeah.
more aware of how information is being packaged and presented to us.
Precisely. And DeResta even argues that, this kind of critical thinking should be taught in schools,
Interesting.
just like reading and writing.
Yeah, it makes sense we equip kids with the tools to navigate the physical world.
Mm-hmm.
Why not the digital one, too, especially when it's becoming harder and harder to distinguish between the two?
Right.
But it's not just about individual responsibility, right? What about the role of platforms and governments in all of this?
That's a huge debate. And there are, people on both sides. Some argue for more regulation of social media companies, holding them accountable for the spread of misinformation on their platforms.
But that's where it gets tricky, because then you run into issues of free speech and censorship. Where do you draw the line?
Exactly. And then there's the challenge of, government intervention, which can be just as problematic.
Yeah.
Who gets to decide what's true and what's not?
It's like walking a tightrope.
It is.
You want to protect people from harmful misinformation without stifling legitimate discourse and dissent.
Right.
Does DeResta acknowledge that complexity?
Well, she does. She doesn't advocate for any single solution.
Okay.
But rather, this multifaceted approach involving individuals, platforms, and policymakers.
So it's not a quick fix. It's an ongoing effort.
Yeah.
A constant evolution of our understanding and our tools.
And it requires a willingness to engage in, difficult conversations, even with those we disagree with.
Right.
Because shutting down dialogue only exacerbates the problem.
Okay, so what can we as individuals do about this? We're reading the book. We're having this conversation now. What?
Okay. Well, DeResta offers some practical tips. And, she starts by saying, be mindful of your own online behavior.
Okay.
Are you contributing to the spread of misinformation, even unintentionally?
Right.
Think before you share and verify information before you believe it.
I see. So due diligence is paramount, but how do we navigate those conversations with friends and family who may have already fallen prey to misinformation?
Yeah.
Those conversations can be really, really difficult.
They can be incredibly difficult. And DeResta suggests, approaching those conversations with empathy and curiosity.
Okay.
Try to understand where they're coming from, what fears or anxieties might be driving their beliefs.
Right.
So instead of, diving into this heated debate, focus on shared values and common ground.
Yeah.
Instead of arguing about, the specifics of a conspiracy theory, maybe talk about the importance of critical thinking.
Right.
Or the dangers of misinformation in general.
Finding those points of connection.
Yeah.
Building bridges instead of walls.
Precisely, it's about fostering understanding rather than division. But of course, addressing this problem requires more than just individual actions.
Right. What about the bigger picture? Are there solutions at a societal level that could help combat misinformation?
Well, D'Aresta advocates for a multi-pronged approach here as well. And she believes, social media platforms have a responsibility to curb the spread of misinformation on their sites.
But how do we do that without impinging on free speech? It's a delicate balance.
It is a very delicate balance.
Yeah.
But D'Aresta argues that platforms can do more to flag misleading content, promote authoritative sources, and make their algorithms more transparent.
So more accountability and transparency from the tech giants, that seems reasonable.
Yeah. She also sees a role for government, specifically in terms of public education campaigns, to improve media literacy and critical thinking skills.
Right, like equipping citizens with the tools to navigate this complex information landscape. We were talking about that earlier. Exactly.
It's about empowering individuals to be more discerning consumers of information. And finally, D'Aresta emphasizes the importance of supporting independent research and journalism, those who are working to expose misinformation and hold powerful actors accountable.
And as we've seen with D'Aresta's own experience, those researchers often become targets themselves.
Right.
It's a fight that requires courage and resilience.
Absolutely. And supporting their work is crucial, whether through donation subscriptions or simply amplifying their voices. The more we invest in truth, the less fertile ground there will be for misinformation to take root.
It's like we're all gardeners tending to this information ecosystem, weeding out the harmful misinformation, nurturing the seeds of truth and critical thinking, a collective effort.
And remember, it's not about winning or losing. It's about creating a more informed, more resilient, and ultimately a more just society.
So we've been talking about some pretty heavy stuff, with misinformation and these like bespoke realities, but it kind of leaves me wondering, where do we go from here?
Right.
What can we actually do to make a difference?
Yeah, that's the question that D'Aresta is really grappling with throughout this whole book. And she offers some surprisingly practical advice, I think.
Okay.
She starts by reminding us that we are all susceptible to manipulation. We have biases, we crave information that confirms our existing beliefs and worldview.
So self-awareness is the first step.
Exactly.
But how do we avoid those rabbit holes?
Right.
Like once we know that we're vulnerable.
Yeah, she calls it building resilience, strengthening those critical thinking muscles that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Questioning sources, being open to diverse perspectives, even those that, we initially disagree with.
Right. So it's like we need to develop this healthy skepticism.
Yeah.
But not become completely cynical. Is that even possible?
Right.
In today's world?
It's a challenge, but D'Aresta really believes it's essential. And one practical step, she says, is diversifying our media diet. So not relying solely on social media for news.
Right.
Seeking out reputable and fact-checked sources.
It's so easy to get caught up in the social media whirlwind.
It is.
Those algorithms are designed to keep us scrolling.
Exactly.
But stepping outside of those echo chambers is really, really crucial.
It's so important.
And I think she also mentions being wary of anything that seems, too sensational or too good to be true.
Right.
Because those clickbait headlines, they're designed to exploit our emotions.
Exactly. It's like the internet knows exactly what buttons to push.
Right. What about having those difficult conversations with friends and family?
Yeah.
People who might have already bought into some of this misinformation.
Yeah.
How do we approach those situations without causing more division?
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
D'Aresta suggests leading with empathy and curiosity, Really try to understand their perspective, what fears or anxieties might be driving their beliefs. So instead of, diving into this heated debate right away, focus on shared values and common ground.
So meeting people where they are?
Yeah.
Trying to understand, why they believe what they believe instead of just being like, you're wrong.
Exactly. It's about building bridges, not walls.
Yeah.
But, D'Aresta doesn't stop at these individual actions.
Okay.
She also explores potential solutions at a more societal level.
Right, and that's where things get even more complex, right?
Right.
How do we address this problem systemically, but without stepping on free speech or giving too much power to any one entity?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And D'Aresta acknowledges those concerns for sure. She does believe that social media platforms have a responsibility to mitigate the spread of this harmful information. But at the same time, she's cautious about government intervention.
Right. It's a total tightrope walk.
It is.
You have
Yeah,
to balance the need for accountability while also protecting freedom.
exactly. So she proposes this kind of multi-pronged approach.
Okay. She suggests that these platforms can do more to flag misleading content, promote authoritative sources, and also make those algorithms that we were talking about more transparent. Yeah, more transparency from those tech giants would be a good start, I think.
I agree.
Give users a little more insight into how these systems actually work.
Absolutely. And she also, sees a role for public education campaigns to improve media literacy, right?
Yeah.
Empowering individuals to really critically evaluate information for themselves. And, she highlights the importance, too, of supporting independent research and journalism.
Right. Those folks are so important because we saw what happened with Desta herself.
Yeah.
These researchers often become targets just for trying to understand this
And
stuff.
trying to expose it. Yeah, their work is crucial.
Yeah, and supporting them, whether it's through donations or subscriptions or just amplifying their voices, I
Yeah.
think that's something we can all do.
Absolutely. The more we invest in truth, I think the less fertile ground there will be for misinformation to take root.
It's like we're all gardeners tending to this information ecosystem,
Yeah, it's a good analogy.
weeding out the misinformation, nurturing those seeds of truth.
And critical thinking,
Yeah.
a collective effort.
I think Desta's book is really a call to action,
Yeah.
a reminder that we're not powerless in the face of this challenge.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, but, this conversation has actually given me a sense of hope.
I think so too.
We can make a difference.
We can. And remember, it's not about winning or losing. It's about creating a more informed, more resilient, and ultimately a more just world.
Invisible Rulers by Renee Desta is a must-read for anyone who wants to understand the forces that are really shaping our online world.
I agree.
It's fascinating and at times unsettling.
It is.
But we hope this deep dive has inspired you to think a little more critically about the information that you encounter online and to become a more active participant in the pursuit of truth. Thanks for joining us.